So my work as an anthropologist, I'm going to talk kind of with two different hats on. So let's have a fine arts background, and for 6 years I ran an arts education program at City Lore, and then I'll talk a little bit about that, and then about the work that I did at Slow Food, which was much larger, about agricultural biodiversity. So while I was at City Lore, one of the things that I focused on with students and teachers, mostly in Woodside, Queens, was literally mapping their kind of personal food identity, because one of the things that as an anthropologist I'm kind of trained to do is realize that eating practices really kind of reproduce and construct identity. So when people make choices, kind of behavioral choices about what it is that they eat, that's informed not just by taste or by access, it's also informed a lot by your identity, and we have multiple identities. So, I would take kids out to look at streetscapes, for example, or we'd go into someone's home, or I'd tell them to do homework. Who's serving the food? Who cleans it up? What's the shape of the table? Who sits where and who talks about what? Who cleans up? And so just sort of unpacking a lot of those really personal experiences and meanings that are ascribed to food, and then from there we would that was a point of entry into exploring all sorts of reasons about food choices that we make. In particular, we did a study of some Colombian bakeries, and I would partner with performing artists. Very often we choreograph a dance that mimics some of the movements that some of these bakers did, and so students would really get a sense of understanding maybe how immigrants got a foothold in the economy in New York City by studying kind of this pathway, which is often through independent food stores, retail food establishments, restaurants and such. At Slow Food, I kind of got a really interesting job. I was able to start the biodiversity programs there, and I don't have a background in the physical sciences. It's in social sciences. My role was really to be sort of an oral historian and do ethnographies and interviews with farmers around the country. But what we decided to do was map American agricultural biodiversity, and there was a coalition of 7 organizations around the country: food, education, conservation, culinary organizations, and basically that's what we did. I was often on the outside of these conversations. They would turn into Latin, and I wouldn't understand the references to the particular varieties. But one thing that I guess I really enjoyed mapping was the sugar maple industry in New England. And Amy Trubeck has done a lot of work on this, and it's related to climate change. But take, for example, there's a sugar maple tree at Allegheny Plateau, and I'll be quick, but it's quite beautiful. It has a pinkish hue to the leaves in autumn, and people really value it in terms of just kind of the visual beauty of this tree. And in the wintertime, it's actually the sweetest tree to tap. And since the 1980s or so, because of kind of soil erosion from acid rain, heavy farm equipment that's gone in, all of this stuff has contributed to kind of the withering away of the sugar maple tree. And this has a big cultural impact in communities, and I guess my role is to really talk about culture. So, people, in these communities for 5 or 8 weeks every winter, the kids get out of school early and they go tap the trees. The parents leave work early. I mean, it's a whole culture and ceremony, a big food event around tapping these trees. And those are the types of things that I try to catalog in my work and try to map, so that when people are making policy decisions or environmental policy decisions, they take into account some of these cultural aspects.